Hey guys. Well, let's begin. Tonight we find ourselves flat on our back, waking up beneath a threadbare canvas tarp, the morning sun already turning the air into soup. You blink against the harsh light. It's too bright, too early, and somehow the desert found a way into your boots overnight. Your tongue is dry as sun-baked leather. Welcome to the Wild West. The first thing you notice, besides the sun trying to barbecue your eyelids, is the dust. It's in your teeth, under your fingernails, and dancing through the air like it owns the place. There's no sound except the slow creak of old wood and a cicada somewhere doing its best impression of a broken violin. To be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before the lights go out, click like and subscribe, but only if you're brave enough to return tomorrow night. Tell us where you're watching from and what time you hit play. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, because silence makes this story worse. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You groan and sit up on your bedroll, which is more burlap sack than bedding. Your spine cracks like a dry branch. Outside your tent, or maybe it's just an old blanket draped over a crate, you spot the campsite. A mule snorts at you. Someone's boiling coffee in a soot-blackened pot that smells like burnt hope and regrets. You're not alone here. There's a group, mostly men, hardened by the sun and something deep. You're new, which means you're at the bottom of the pecking order. And out here, there's no HR department. You fumble for your boots, shake out the scorpions, hopefully, and shove your feet in. They're damp. Of course they are. Your socks are, well, let's just say your feet haven't known comfort in a long while. The sand grates between your toes and the worn leather. Every step crunches. In town, the day is already alive. It doesn't wait for anyone, not even the greenhorn just off the coach, which is probably how you got here. That, or you lost a card game you never really understood. Either way, stuck now. The buildings are sun-faded and mostly leaning. Wooden sidewalks creak beneath boots, hooves, and the occasional wheelbarrow full of scrap metal, or screaming child. You pass a blacksmith pounding metal like it owes him money. Sparks fly, and the heat doubles. It smells like hot iron and sweat. His apprentice is about 8 years old and already chain-smoking. A few kids run by barefoot, their faces crusted in what you hope is just dirt. They're laughing in that half-feral frontier way. One stops to gawk at you. "You don't look like you'll last long," she says, then skips off. Charming. Then there's the sound. Not just the cicadas, but boots, hammers, barking dogs, shouting men, and far off someone practicing banjo very badly. It's a wild, unsupervised orchestra of a town. You get the sense it was built in a weekend and is held together with good intentions and horse spit. By midday, the temperature has climbed to the kind of heat that makes your vision waver. There's no shade except under the warped planks of the saloon's porch, or inside the dusty general store, where flour and tobacco share shelves with nails. And questionable-looking jerky. Historical fact? Most Western towns in the 1800s were thrown together almost overnight during economic booms, like rail construction or gold rushes. They had few, if any, regulations, and more often than not, water was scarce and sanitation non-existent. You try to find some shade beside a watering trough that smells of horse spit and irony. Someone tells you the next well is 7 miles east. You nod, like that's helpful. It's not. A donkey wanders past with a bell around its neck and a look of total indifference. A man follows it, shouting something about stolen pence. No one blinks. Apparently, that's normal. Your stomach growls, but we'll get to that disaster in the next section. By now, your face feels sunburned, your back aches, and your mouth tastes like you licked a brick. Someone offers you a tin cup of coffee. It's thick, sludgy, and tastes like charred bark, steeped in despair. You drink it anyway. Fringe tidbit of the day. Some frontier folks wore wool in the desert because it protected against sunburn and, allegedly, snakebite. You'll question that logic later, when you're sweating out your organs. A group of locals gathers for what looks like an argument, though nobody's yelling, just tense body language and the occasional spitting. One man wears a sheriff's badge, the other wears half a shirt and no boots. The sheriff nods, then walks off. Justice served? Historians still argue whether the Wild West was as lawless as legends claim. Some towns actually had functioning courts and records. Others were, well, more like this. You decide to look for shelter as the sun leans westward. The temperature doesn't drop, but the wind picks up. Dust stings your eyes, and now you're squinting like everyone else. Congratulations, you're blending in. A stranger tips his hat at you. You nod. He doesn't stop smiling. You don't stop walking. As night falls, the desert starts to chill. You're still covered in sweat, which is bad news. Your wet shirt might freeze against your skin, and the coyotes are already howling. The stars above are startling, more than you've ever seen, piercing the velvet sky like 1,000 ghost campfires. It's beautiful, and deeply unsettling, because there's no comfort in knowing how small and alone you are out here. You settle in for another night under the tarp. Your body hurts in strange places, your boots are still full of sand, and something's crawling near your bedroll. Don't ask. You try to sleep, but the ground has rocks in all the wrong places. Your dreams are filled with heat, hooves, and that donkey bell, jingling over and over again. Tomorrow you'll need to eat, but eating out here is a gamble, and we all know how well those turn out. You wake to the sound of something sizzling, only it's not bacon, it's your skin. The early morning sun is already heating your face like a skillet, and you realize with dread that you forgot to pull your hat over your eyes. Rookie mistake. The heat hits fast out here, and shade is a luxury you don't always get to keep. Your stomach growled loud enough to scare off a nearby prairie dog. You sit up, spine crackling again, and scan your meager supplies. 1 tin of beans, unopened, a heel of dry bread that could double as a blunt weapon, and a tiny cloth bundle with something rattling inside. You untie it and find. Still, your options are slim. You take a bite and immediately regret it. Hardtack, if you've never had the pleasure, is flour, water, and spite. It was made to survive storage, not digestion. Civil War soldiers used to carve it into dominoes for fun, and sometimes it came with added protein in the form of weevils. You chew and chew. The biscuit isn't softening. Your molars consider unionizing. Desperate, you wander to the creek just outside town. It glitters in the light, and the sound of running water is pure seduction. You kneel, cup your hands, and drink. Bad move. See, the water may look clean, but upstream someone's probably bathing their mule, or worse. Out here, everyone uses the same water source. There's no filtration, no treatment plant, and no lifeguard on duty. You've just introduced your delicate modern insides to a historical petri dish of bacteria, parasites, and questionable floaties. Historians still argue whether more pioneers died from bullets or bacteria, but there's little debate about what really hollowed out wagon trains: dysentery, cholera, and typhoid. Glamorous, right? You feel it in your belly first, a slow cramp that tightens like someone twisting a rag inside your intestines. You stand up too fast. The world spins a little. That's ideal. Pyotr's already voting against you. You try walking it off. Maybe it's just nerves, or hardtack revenge. But no, that rolling discomfort is rising like storm clouds over a prairie. Don't eat anything heavy, one of the older locals advises, watching you pale, or spicy, or anything really. Just chew tobacco, kills the gut bugs. He grins with 3 teeth. You thank him and walk away quickly. That's when you notice the communal latrine situation, or rather, the lack of one. Fringe tidbit of the day: some frontier folks believed drinking whiskey would sterilize bad water. This led to entire communities walking around slightly tipsy at all hours, convinced they were being health conscious. You might consider joining them soon. Back in town, someone offers you something that looks like stew. You're starving. You accept. You swallow a spoonful before asking what's in it. The answer includes squirrel, maybe possum, and the vague phrase, "whatever we caught." The stew is greasy and strange, but it beats gnawing more hardtack. For a moment you feel okay, then your stomach reminds you who's boss. Again. You retreat behind a shed and spend some deeply unpleasant time alone. You begin to understand how terrifying it is to be sick in a world with no urgent care, no rehydration packets, and no one who really understands germ theory yet. There's a man named Doc Wilkins who runs a small clinic out of his saloon's back room. He'll see you, for a price. That price? Your boots, or your gun, or your dignity. Maybe all three. You pass? For now. But the fear sets in. Out here, diarrhea isn't just an inconvenience, it's a death sentence if it doesn't stop. You remember hearing once that pioneers would bury entire families, just days after someone got the grip. What started as a cramp ended 6 feet under, wrapped in a spare sheet and a whispered prayer. You sit under a tree and try to rest. A dog comes up and licks your boot. You let him. He's the only creature that seems to care. His tail wags. He smells like smoked meat and regret. Someone offers you a swig of whiskey. You hesitate, then drink. It burns like fire going down, but your belly quiets, whether from shock or surrender. You're not sure. You think about how fragile humans really are. All it takes is one careless sip, one undercooked squirrel, one bad guess at which berries are edible. There's no safety net here, no second chances. The land doesn't care. Historical fact? By the 1,878-year-old cemetery still tried to build wells or import water via barrels from cleaner sources. But most settlers still relied on rivers and creeks, which were easily contaminated. Sanitation was a dream, not a practice. You lie back again on the crunchy ground and stare at the sky. It's wide, endless, and judging you. You're dizzy from heat, dehydrated, and still a little hungry. And tomorrow, you'll need to eat again. You close your eyes and try not to imagine what's crawling under your blanket or inside your intestines. In the distance, someone's playing a harmonica badly. A chicken clucks. A man yells at the sky. Just another normal evening. You wake to yelling. Not the cheerful, someone want a pie contest kind. This is the kind of shouting that makes you freeze mid-breath. You sit up, still half dreaming, but the scene in front of you is definitely real, and not especially comforting. A man is being dragged through the main street by his collar, boots scraping the dirt like he's already given up. 2 others are following close behind, one waving a revolver with too much energy for this hour of the morning. Bystanders watch, not interfering, just watching. Like it's theatre. Because in a way, it is. Welcome to the Wild West, where everyone's got a story, a secret, and a weapon within reach. You clutch your bedroll closer. There's no police station, no phone to call. There is a sheriff, technically, but whether he's sober is a coin toss. And that man doing the dragging might be a deputy, or just someone angry enough to pretend he is. Titles are flexible out here. You step out into the dusty road cautiously, eyes scanning the buildings. The saloon's still open from last night. One man is asleep on the porch. Another stands inside the doorway, cradling a shotgun like it's a sleepy kitten. You're new. And new means suspicious. Where you from? A voice asks behind you. You turn, slowly. A young man, maybe 16, stands there, arms crossed, with a knife tucked into each boot. You try to answer, but he's already smirking. Don't matter. Ain't no one from here anyway. He walks off before you can respond. And that's your first real lesson. Everyone's armed and everyone's watching. Historical fact? During the height of Western expansion, firearms were not just common, they were expected. Revolvers, rifles, even sawed-off shotguns were carried by cowboys, settlers, barkeeps, and yes, even school teachers. A well-worn Colt 45 was more common than soap. And here's the tricky part. Eye contact matters. Too much, and it's a challenge. Too little, and you're hiding something. You have to walk the exact line of friendly but not weak. Good luck with that. You find yourself inside the general store. It's stocked with everything from dried beans to funeral shrouds, both equally useful out here. The man behind the counter sizes you up. You need anything, stranger? You nod, unsure. Bullets, and maybe soap? He laughs. Good combo. You pay in coin, since paper money's still mistrusted around here. Behind you, another customer argues loudly over the price of tobacco. His hand is resting near his belt where a pistol sits. No one flinches. Fringe tidbit of the day? There was a town in Arizona where a woman once shot her husband during a poker game, then continued playing his hand, and won. The sheriff allegedly fined her for disturbing the peace, not for murder. Back outside, you decide to explore, pretending you know what you're doing. A group of locals is loitering by the stable, passing around a jug. One of them calls to you. You ain't from Dodge, are you? Nope, you answer, trying to sound casual. He nods slowly. Good. We don't like folks from Dodge. No one laughs. You walk away. Just past the feed store, you see a little church. It's plain, weather-worn, with a crooked steeple and a bullet hole in the bell. The preacher stands outside, polishing a rifle. He waves. You wave back. He doesn't smile. Inside, the pews are empty except for one elderly woman praying loudly about those terrible railmen. You back out quietly. Historians still argue whether the image of the trigger-happy frontier is exaggerated. Some towns had strict no-carry laws inside city limits. But enforcement? That was more like a suggestion. You sit on a crate near the livery stable and watch as two men face off in front of the saloon. It's not a duel, exactly. It's more of a slow, tense argument where every hand twitch counts. Say that again, one man says. I said, the other repeats, slower now. You're sitting in my chair. Silence. Then a quick blur of movement, and suddenly, one man's hat is on the ground and the other is bleeding from his arm. Just like that, it's over in seconds. No one cheers, no one screams. One woman tuts and mutters, not again, before sweeping her porch. A dog barks lazily. The man who got shot walks himself to the dock. He's more embarrassed than wounded. You realize now, people don't shoot to kill most of the time. They shoot to warn, to scare, to prove a point. But that doesn't mean they miss often. You tuck your own pistol a little tighter into your waistband. It's heavy, unfamiliar. You'd barely know how to use it, and out here, that might be the biggest danger of all. You've heard the phrase, peace through strength. Well, in the Wild West, it's more like peace through being slightly more dangerous than the next guy. Someone tosses you a canteen. You look pale, they say. Just new, you reply. Same thing. By evening, the temperature has dropped, but the tension hasn't. The saloon is filling again. You hear a piano, off-key, but determined. Laughter, too, but always edged with something sharp. You hesitate at the swinging doors. Go in, and you're vulnerable. Stay out, and you're suspicious. You step inside. The bar is crowded. A woman with a drawn beauty mark serves whiskey in cracked mugs. A man at the far end is asleep, or passed out, with a gun still in hand. You order a drink. The bartender doesn't ask your name. He just pours. You sip, and it tastes like varnish. You sip again. Someone bumps into your shoulder, hard. You turn. A large man with a handlebar mustache scowls at you. You apologize quickly. He stares, then grins. Happens. He walks away. You exhale. You survive the saloon. For now. When you make it back to your bedroll well after midnight, the saloon's crooked piano still plinking away behind you like a soundtrack to poor life decisions. The whiskey didn't help you sleep. It just made the ground feel slightly less judgmental. But as you lie there, belly still sore from the hardtack and dysentery double feature, you realize something worse than gunfights, bandits, or dehydration awaits in the Wild West. if you have to use the bathroom. But here's the situation. There is no bathroom. No porcelain throne, no flush, no privacy. Just a hole in the ground about 100 yards from camp. And in case you were wondering, toilet paper? Not invented yet. Or at least, not readily available. You might get a page of last week's newspaper if you were lucky. More often, leaves, or corn cobs, or nothing at all. You grab your boots, your resolve, and a lantern. The path to the latrine is narrow and suspiciously noisy. Crickets, wind, probably raccoons. Hopefully, raccoons. You arrive and find someone's already beaten you to it. They nod, finish, and toss a rock into the pit. A strange but apparently accepted closing ritual. Now it's your turn. You step inside and immediately regret every decision that led you to this moment. The smell is, let's call it haunting. You try not to breathe. It doesn't help. Fringe tidbit of the day. Some outhouses were two-seaters. Not because anyone wanted to socialize, but to accommodate different-sized users, adults and kids. Also, it wasn't uncommon for people to fall in, which adds a whole new dimension of fear to this already cursed chamber. You get the job done. It isn't elegant. You emerge feeling about 40% less alive and 100% more humble. Back in town, you find a bucket of water and try to clean up. Your hands still smell wrong, and here's where it all unravels. No one washes their hands, not properly, not regularly. They touch their food, their faces, their friends, and then you. Everything feels sticky and suspect. Historical fact? Hand washing wasn't widely practiced until the late 19th century, even by doctors. Many still believed disease came from bad air, not microscopic organisms. So hygiene was casual at best, catastrophic at worst. You spot the town's bathhouse next to the blacksmith's. It's one room, one tin tub, and one reused bucket of water per customer. You can pay for a bath, or just bribe a hotel maid to let you sneak into a room and steal a wash basin. You consider your options, but ultimately you skip it. Too expensive, too awkward. You pour a ladle of water over your head and hope no one notices you smell like adventure and old stew. By midday, you start to see the consequences of this town's sanitation choices. There's a boy with red eyes and a constant cough. A woman wraps her wrist with a filthy rag that probably made things worse. And someone's selling miracle tonic made from vinegar, sulfur, and hope. You meet a man called Louis, who brags he hasn't bathed since Christmas. It's July. You inch away. Another man claims he cures illness by sitting on hot coals to sweat out the poisons. You inch away faster. You begin to appreciate the brutal simplicity of the Wild West. There are no safety nets, no second chances if you pick the wrong plant, drink the wrong water, or ignore that infected cut on your ankle. Historians still argue whether frontier towns were as disease-ridden as legend suggests, but there's no question that hygiene lagged behind the population boom. Add poor infrastructure, overcrowding, and livestock roaming the streets, and you've got the makings of a bacterial bonanza. You retreat to a patch of grass behind the boarding house, trying to catch some breeze. The air smells faintly of manure and regret. A stranger offers you a bite of his lunch, salt pork and onions, wrapped in wax paper. You decline politely. His hands are black with coal dust and who knows what. He shrugs and eats anyway. By afternoon, your shirt sticks to your back with a cocktail of sweat and desperation. You decide it's time. You need a real wash. You pay the bathhouse man 2 bits and wait your turn. Inside, the tub water is murky, but warm. Sort of. You step in and try not to think about who else has floated here today. The door has no lock. A goat peers in curiously. You scrub with a sliver of soap and rinse with a sponge that has clearly lived too many lives. Still, you feel better. Less itchy, slightly less cursed. You dry off with a sackcloth towel, then redress in the same dirty clothes. And just like that, your brief moment of cleanliness ends. Back outside, you meet the preacher again. He's sweating in full wool vestments and talking to no one in particular about the end times. You nod respectfully. He offers you a tin of peppermint oil to keep the demons out of your gut. You accept, mostly for the smell. As night falls, the town grows quieter. Not peaceful, just tired. People move slower, dogs bark less, chickens roost. The saloon piano hits fewer wrong notes. You sit by a fire with strangers. One talks about his sister dying from a gut fever. Another jokes about sharing a toothbrush once, with a mule. No one laughs. You find yourself staring into the flames, wondering how these people do it. Every day, in the dirt, with nothing sterile, nothing reliable, just grit, grit, and more grit. The wind shifts. You smell outhouse again. Time for bed. Dawn breaks again, rude and bright, dragging you back into the waking world like a hangover without the fun part. You sit up, sore from head to heel, wondering how you can feel older than time after just a few nights on the frontier. A mule brays nearby, probably laughing at your misery. It's time to head into town. Something's buzzing through the air today, and it's not just flies. There's a crowd forming near the edge of the road, where yesterday there was only tumbleweed and regret. A fresh sign hammered into the dusty ground reads, "Gold Strike, 20 miles north." You squint. Someone's handing out flyers, which already feels suspicious, but the effect is instant. Boots are getting laced, horses are being saddled, wagons loaded, everyone's moving like they've just found religion. It's the gold rush, baby. Again. Historical fact? Gold fever swept across the West in waves. California in 1849, Colorado in the late 1850s, and even Alaska by the 1890s. Wherever gold was rumored, people ran there with shovels, greed, and very little planning. You get swept along, because of course you do. It's either follow the stampede, or stay behind with empty pockets and stories of what could have been. Your ride is a rickety wagon owned by a man named Frank, who speaks only in grunts and offers you pickled eggs for breakfast. You politely decline and sit on a crate full of shovels that smells like old socks and ambition. The journey north is chaos. People everywhere, on foot, on horseback, dragging carts, carrying pans, trailing families and goats, and dreams they'll likely bury along the way. There's energy in the air, a manic buzz that makes even your still upset stomach churn with excitement. The dust kicks up fast, visibility drops. You get a mouthful of grit every time you try to talk, so eventually you stop talking. The sun beats down. Someone loses a wheel, someone else loses a horse. You reach the site by afternoon. It's not a mine, it's a mess. Tents pitched haphazardly, men already swinging pickaxes into hillsides like treasure will burst from the dirt if they just hit hard enough. Some are knee-deep in mud, swearing. Others are panhandling in the stream, hoping a few swirls of water will yield glitter and glory. You pick up a pan and try for yourself. The water is freezing and filled with rocks that look like gold but aren't. You squint at a shiny speck. A grizzled prospector peers over your shoulder and snorts. "That's mica, city boy. Good for foolin' and nothing else." Like you knew that. Fringe tidbit of the day. During the gold rush, enterprising folks got rich, not from mining, but from selling goods to miners. You dig, and pan, and dig again. Your hands blister. Your back screams. Your feet slide in the mud. Nothing glitters for you, except sweat. Nearby, two men argue over a claim line. One's waving a pickaxe, the other draws a pistol. Everyone pretends not to notice. Historians still argue whether most gold rushes truly paid off for the average person. While some struck it rich, many walked away poorer, sicker, or not at all. By sundown you've earned a quarter ounce of nothing and a few new cuts on your hands. But the camp's alive with desperate hope. Fires crackle, bottles are passed. Someone claims to have found a nugget the size of a walnut. He won't show it. Too risky, he says. Sure. You sleep under the stars again. Your blanket smells like horse. You dream of gold coins raining from the sky, only to wake and find someone stepped on your foot in the night. You swear vengeance, then realize it was probably just a mule. Day 2 starts the same. Digging, sweating, arguing. Someone builds a crude saloon out of tarps and old crates. The sign reads, Last Nugget Tavern. You stop in and find a man selling fried dough for $50. You consider it, then spend the money on whiskey instead. Priorities. Suddenly a fight breaks out over a pan that supposedly had real flakes. The pan gets thrown, the flakes scatter, so does the crowd. You cling to your drink and your dignity, barely. By now you're filthy, broke and sunburned in places you didn't know could burn. Your nose peels, your lips crack, your muscles ache from swinging tools meant for giants. You overhear a man from Missouri say, There's gold in Utah, I swear it. He's already packing up. Another whispers about Montana, another about a new strike in Mexico. It never ends. Gold fever doesn't cure, it just migrates. You gather your few belongings, one cracked pan, one stub of soap and an empty coin pouch, and start heading back to town. The crowd's already thinning. The dream is evaporating. You pass a sign someone scrawled in charcoal on a piece of scrap wood. Fortune favors the lucky, not the sweaty. You nod solemnly. At the camp's edge, a woman laughs as she finds a gold flake in her boot, or claims to. Everyone swarms her. You keep walking, your stomach rumbles, not from gold fever, but from not eating for 12 hours. As the sun dips behind the hills, you trudge back toward town, covered in mud, regret, and the faintest spark of hope you pretend not to notice. You arrive back in town, sore, broke, and covered in what could either be dried mud or expired stew. At this point, you're too tired to care. The gold rush did what it does best. It rushed in, made promises, shattered dreams, and left you with bruises and a weird rash on your wrist. The plan was to lie down for a few hours, maybe wash off the dirt and delusion, but fate, as always, has other plans. You're barely 10 feet into town when something moves in the corner of your vision, something low, fast, and angry. You freeze, the mule tethered near the water trough freezes, the kid throwing stones at a fence post doesn't. He keeps tossing rocks like this town isn't seconds from a crisis. You look down, snake. Coiled near a barrel, its tongue flicking in and out like it's testing your resolve. A western diamondback rattlesnake, thick and grumpy, tail twitching a warning like an angry maraca. You take one step back. It takes none. It doesn't need to. Then, snap, it strikes. Historical fact: rattlesnakes caused genuine terror in frontier towns. Their venom wasn't always fatal, but it could disable you for days or kill you if you didn't get help fast. And help usually meant a bottle of whiskey and crossed fingers. The bite hits your ankle like fire. It's not dramatic at first, more like a pinch. But then the burning spreads, your leg going hot and heavy all at once. Someone yells. The kid with the rocks finally looks over and starts screaming. They haul you to the dock. Yes, that dock. The one with the back room in the saloon and the reputation for either miracles or malpractice, depending on who you ask. His office smells like stale gin and something vaguely medicinal, which is an upgrade from the outhouse scent you're used to. He eyes your leg. Snake? You nod. Pours whiskey on the bite, then hands you the bottle. Drink. You do. It doesn't help. Fringe tidbit of the day. Some 19th century cures for snakebites included cutting X's over the wound, sucking out venom, or applying poultices made of tobacco, gunpowder, or even raw meat. None of them worked particularly well. The doc doesn't do any of that. He wraps your leg tight, gives you more whiskey and says, "Rest. Don't die." Then he leaves. You're not sure if he means to come back. You spend the next few hours on a warped cot in a room that doubles as a storage closet and possibly a chicken coop. The walls are paper thin. You can hear someone losing a card game in the saloon next door and threatening to shoot the piano. Again. The bite burns like the sun and throbs like a war drum. You try to sleep, but the heat, the pain, and the smell of turpentine make it impossible. You hallucinate a little. You dream of snakes wearing cowboy hats. By morning the swelling's bad, but you're not dead. Yet. The doc wanders back in, half-dressed, and mutters something about lucky blood. You thank him. He asks for payment. You offer a handful of useless rocks from your failed gold panning. He accepts one and mutters, "Shiny." Outside, you hobble into the daylight, dragging your foot like a haunted marionette. Everyone notices your limp, but no one stops to ask. This is normal. Injuries are badges here. You sit near the stable and rest. A dog curls up beside you. You consider naming him Venom. He sneezes in your face. You downgrade him to maybe. A local tells you about a man who got bit 3 times in one summer and survived. He also lost a toe and half a moustache, but who's counting? Historians still argue whether frontier medicine was as primitive as pop culture suggests. Some doctors were well trained, especially those sent west from big cities. Others, not so much. Anyone with a bottle of ether and a saw could call themselves doc. You hobble to the general store, hoping to find something to ease the pain. The storekeeper offers a salve made from bear fat and honey. You stare. He shrugs. Keeps flies off. You buy it. Not because you believe him, but because flies are already showing interest in your bandage. You're back at your camp. You try to keep your leg elevated on a rock that might be cursed. You reflect on your last 48 hours. Gold disappointment, bathroom trauma, and now this. The Wild West isn't trying to kill you with gunfights or duels. It's going for the long game. Disease, dehydration, snake venom. You eat a few beans from a tin and wonder if they're even cooked. You eat them anyway, then lie back in the dust and stare up at the wide, uncaring sky. You think about how frontier folks lived, with danger not as an exception, but as the default setting. And that's the wildest thing of all. As night falls again, you wrap your blanket tight and listen to the coyotes howling from the hills. One sounds alarmingly close. You hope it doesn't like the taste of snake-bitten ankles. The dog maybe growls low, then settles. You take that as a sign to sleep. Or try to. Your leg still throbs, your heart still races, and you've officially learned the #1 rule of the West. Don't put your feet anywhere you can't see. You wake to wield loud, splintering, wooden ones groaning under pressure and bumping along hard-packed dirt. The sun isn't even up yet, but the sound drags you from shallow, venom-sweaty sleep. You groggily pull yourself up onto one elbow, your ankle throbbing like an old church bell. Then you see it, the stagecoach. It lurches into town like a half-broken carnival ride, horses foaming at the mouth, mud slapping up onto the driver's boots as he cracks the whip again and again. It's not graceful, it's not smooth, it's pure chaos on wheels. You decide to try your luck with it anyway. Maybe this coach can carry you far away from snakebites, bad coffee, and whatever's still crawling in your blanket. You limp toward it, dragging your gear behind you. The driver, a wiry man with sun-leathered skin and a twitch in his left eye, doesn't even look at you. One seat left. If you can pay. You offer him the rest of your coins and your only clean shirt. He shrugs and jerks his thumb at the door. That's how you end up wedged between a woman with a parrot on her shoulder and a man who smells like fermented onions and mutters, "Cheyenne," every few minutes. The coach jolts forward, and you realize 2 things at once. You will not survive this trip with your spine intact. There are no brakes. Historical fact? Stagecoaches were the most common way to travel long distances in the Wild West. They were notoriously uncomfortable, ran on rigid schedules, and were frequently targeted by outlaws or overturned by rough terrain. You bounce so hard your teeth rattle. The road isn't so much a road as a suggestion, a path made of potholes, sharp rocks, and the occasional discarded boot. The coach hits every single one. You clutch your bag with one hand and the window frame with the other. The woman with the parrot doesn't blink. She's either done this 100 times or died inside. The parrot screams, "Hang on!" every few minutes, which is either a coincidence or deeply disturbing. You stop briefly at a watering station, a shack with a crooked well and a bored teenager refilling canteens. You try to stretch your legs, but your snake-bitten ankle lets out a sharp protest. You sit down instead and instantly regret it, as your bones rearrange themselves like rusty furniture. You ask the teenager how far to the next town. He shrugs. "Depends. If the horses don't spook and nobody shoots at us, maybe by sundown." You nod like that's fine. It's not. Back on the road, the coach leans dangerously every time it rounds a bend. The driver doesn't slow. You realize he's chewing tobacco and also probably asleep with his eyes open. Comforting. Fringe tidbit of the day. Some stagecoaches were called mud wagons because they traveled even in the worst conditions, slogging through muck with canvas sides and no springs. Basically, you were signing up for a full-body concussion on wheels. By hour 5, your tailbone has officially retired. You've lost feeling in both legs and part of your soul. The muttering man has stopped saying Cheyenne and now just hums the same off-key tune on loop. Suddenly, the coach stops short, hard. You lurch forward into the parrot woman, who doesn't flinch. Outside, voices yell. You peek through a torn curtain. Bandits. Well, not exactly bandits. More like a few men in dusters with scarves over their faces and guns they hold like they know how to use. The driver yells, "We ain't carrying much," and raises his hands. One of the riders approaches the coach door and swings it open. His eyes scan each passenger. They linger on you. He gestures to your bag. "Let's see it." You hand it over, trying to keep your face neutral. Inside, a cracked mirror, 2 spoons, and 1 half-eaten biscuit you were saving for dinner. He laughs, drops it in the dirt, rides off. Historians still argue whether highway robbery was as rampant as the legends say. Some routes were patrolled by lawmen and protected convoys, but isolated paths, like this one, were easy pickings. The bandits disappear without bloodshed, which feels like a win. The driver mutters something about lucky this time, then whips the reins. The coach jerks forward again. By sundown, you see the next town cresting over the hills. Just a few dusty buildings clinging to each other like old drunks. A water tower leans dangerously. A bell tolls from the church, though no one seems to be going in. The coach rolls to a stop, and you tumble out like an unstrapped sack of laundry. Your legs barely work, and your head feels like it's been used for target practice. The parrot woman tips her hat and walks away like nothing happened. The muttering man just keeps humming. You limp toward the nearest building that smells like food and people not pointing guns. A few locals stare at you. One offers a chair, another offers you something that might be soup. You don't ask questions. You just sit and eat, and try not to cry. The soup is lukewarm and tastes like mystery. You slurp it anyway. Fringed detail. Some stagecoach companies issued rules of decorum, like no talking to fellow passengers unless spoken to, no chewing tobacco indoors, and no complaining about the ride. You broke all 3. It's fine. You sleep that night in a cot above the tavern, your spine still stuck in zigzag mode and your ankle refusing to forgive. Outside, a dog barks, someone sings badly, and the wind howls like it's got something to prove. You think back to the coach, the dust, the bandits, the parrot. You wonder what it says about the West that none of it feels unusual anymore. You roll over and mutter, "Chinese," just once, to see how it feels. Morning arrives with the gentle elegance of a frying pan to the face. A rooster screams somewhere in the alley below your window, and your back lets you know that sleeping on a lumpy cot above a tavern is only slightly more restful than being trampled by cattle. You groan, sit up, and feel every joint creak, like a porch swing in a windstorm. The town below is already stirring, boots on balk walks, metal clinking against wood, a dog barking at nothing and everything. You pull on your boots, still caked in yesterday, and stumble downstairs hoping for coffee, or at least something brown and hot that doesn't smell like feet. The barkeep nods at you, grunts, and pours a mug from a pot that's probably been boiling since last week. It smells like regret. You drink it anyway. Then you hear it, the sharp clatter of glass, a shout, and the unmistakable sound of fists connecting with flesh. You rush outside, mug still in hand, and see a man being hurled through the saloon's swinging doors, like he's just been evicted from gravity. Welcome to saloon culture. The man picks himself up, dusts off his coat and charges back in. You follow, because clearly you've learned nothing. Inside it's chaos, but a familiar kind. Sawdust on the floor to soak up spills and sins. A half-broken piano clinks out a half-hearted tune. The bartender's wiping a glass with a glag that might once have been white. And a group of men are laughing as another pair prepares to settle their dispute the old-fashioned way, with fists and maybe furniture. Historical fact: saloons were the social hub of frontier towns, offering booze, gambling, music, gossip, and the occasional black eye. Some towns had more saloons than churches or schools. Priorities. You duck as a chair goes flying past your head. It splinters against the wall. No one reacts. The bartender sighs and replaces it without a word. You find a stool and sit, carefully. The man beside you is playing cards with three others. One has a twitch in his eye. One has a scar that looks suspiciously like a bite mark. The last keeps tapping his revolver on the table like it's a nervous habit. You order something called snakebite whiskey. It burns. You blink once, and your soul nearly leaves your body. A woman saunters over. She's wearing more fringe than fabric, and her boots look like they've seen combat. You knew? You nod. She eyes your bandaged ankle. Snaked. You nod again. She smiles. You'll fit in just fine. A man bursts through the doors, red-faced and shouting. He cheated. I saw him. Guns are halfway drawn before anyone even processes the accusation. You duck instinctively. Everyone freezes. Then someone coughs. Slowly, the weapons are lowered. The accused shrugs, tosses the man a coin and mutters, "Buy yourself a better pair of eyes." Tension breaks. The piano picks back up. A man starts juggling knives for no apparent reason. Fringe tidbit of the day. One saloon in Montana famously employed a bear as a bouncer. The bear sat chained near the door and was reportedly very effective at discouraging troublemakers, until someone poked it. That went poorly. You sip more whiskey, slowly now, trying to blend in. Someone challenges you to a game of 5-card draw. You agree, because again, you've learned nothing. You lose the first hand, and the second. You think the third one might be yours, but then the twitchy man lays down 4 queens, and you start to wonder if the deck's got more queens than usual. You step away from the table before your boots become the next ante. Over by the window, a young man is telling a story about robbing a train. He's clearly lying. You can tell because the details change every time someone new joins the table. But no one calls him out. Stories are currency here, and the more dramatic the better. Historians still argue whether saloons were as violent and unruly as legend says. Some were relatively peaceful gathering spots, others were pure chaos, especially in boomtowns where tempers ran as hot as the stills behind the bar. You stand up, stretch and wobble a little. The whiskey's doing laps in your bloodstream. You figure it's time to get some air. Outside, the town is moving like it's got somewhere to be, but doesn't know how to get there. A dog chases a chicken. A preacher yells at a drunk man to stop dancing. A child throws a pebble at a passing mule and instantly regrets it. You stroll toward the edge of town, where a smaller saloon, less rowdy, more crooked, leans against a building that looks like it gave up years ago. Inside, a few older men are playing dominoes in total silence. One nods at you. The bartender doesn't even look up. You sit, order coffee. It's slightly less offensive than this morning's. You hear whispers of something bigger. A poker tournament coming up. Real stakes. Big money. Bigger danger. You take note. But not because you want in. You just want to be far away when someone flips the wrong card. Fringe detail, some saloons were multi-purpose. They served as makeshift courthouses, wedding halls, funeral parlors, and jail cells. One even doubled as a dentist's office on Sundays. The West was nothing if not efficient. By sundown, the saloon across town is lit up again. Music spills into the street. Someone's singing off-key, accompanied by what might be a harmonica and definitely isn't rhythm. You return, mostly because it's the only place open that doesn't involve horses or shovels. Inside, the woman with the parrot is back. So is the twitchy card player. So is the tension. A man slams his hand on the table. You've been looking at me wrong all week. His opponent raises an eyebrow. This the first time I've seen you? Well, now you've seen me. A gun's drawn. A shot's fired. And the chandelier above shatters. Dust. Screams. Everyone hits the floor. You press your cheek to the sawdust and try not to breathe. The bartender's voice cuts through the chaos. Out. All of you. People groan and shuffle out. A man with a bloody nose starts singing again. You crawl to your feet, wipe splinters from your sleeve and step outside into the cool night air. Your ears are ringing, your heart still racing, and your boots are full of sawdust. You survived the saloon again. Barely. You're starting to think the Wild West is less about wide-open freedom and more about surviving long enough to figure out where not to stand, like, say, the middle of a saloon during a shootout. That memory still echoing in your ears as you limp toward the jailhouse at the far end of town, if only because it's the last building you haven't seen from the inside yet. You're not here to get arrested, probably. But curiosity has teeth out here, and you've heard talk. Quiet, mumbled stories about a sheriff who hands out justice with one hand and drinks with the other. Sometimes both at once. The jailhouse is small. One room, 2 cells, 1 door held together with a horseshoe nail and either gum or determination. You step inside. The air smells like tobacco, gun oil, and sleep deprivation. Behind a desk that's more splinters than wood sits the sheriff. Boots up, hat down, snoring. You cough. Nothing. You knock on the desk. He shifts slightly and mumbles. Tell Slim if he brings me another dead chicken, I swear, I'll... You knock louder. The sheriff jolts upright, squints at you, and then grins like he remembers something funny from 3 years ago. You in town? He asks. Well then, he says, stretching his arms wide like he's about to hug the world. Let me tell you how justice works round here. Historical fact? In many frontier towns, the sheriff was elected by popular vote, which often meant he was either the best shot, the least hated, or the only one sober enough to remember election day. Some sheriffs maintained order. Others leaned more into the wild part of the West. The sheriff pours himself a mug of something strong and offers you a sip. You decline. Your stomach is still recovering from yesterday's soup. See, we got rules here, he says. Not laws exactly, but rules. Like don't steal nobody's horse. Don't shoot a man unless he deserves it. And don't cheat at poker. Unless you're better at lying than him. You nod again. It seems safer than disagreeing. He points to the cells behind him. One's empty. The other holds a man snoring louder than a train whistle. Drunk again, the sheriff mutters. We just take turns watching him. You glance around the room. No deputy, no schedule, just a ledger on the desk, stained with something brown and crusty. You're pretty sure it's not ink. A woman bursts through the door, frantic. Sheriff, he done stole my mule again. Which mule? He asks, already putting on his hat. Fecy. Ooh, that fool's gonna get kicked again. He nods at you. Wanna ride along? You blink. I'm not a lawman. He shrugs. Neither am I most days. And just like that, You're deputized by boredom and proximity. You climb onto a horse the sheriff calls Liar, and immediately regret it. The saddle's made of wood and something sticky. Your ankle screams. Your tailbone sends a resignation letter. You ride out to a shack just outside town. A man with 3 teeth and 1 eyebrow is trying to convince a clearly stolen mule to eat a cigar. The sheriff sighs. "Come on, Amos." Amos groans. "She likes me." The mule kicks him in the shin, hard. The sheriff grabs the reins, hands them to the woman, and tells Amos to walk home. "And next time," he says, "at least ask." Back at the jailhouse, you realize something important. Justice out here isn't about fairness. It's about speed and reputation. Fringe tidbit of the day: some sheriffs operated entire counties solo. No deputies, no backup, just a revolver, a badge, and the hope people feared them more than they disobeyed. Later that day, you're leaning against the rail outside the general store when a man stumbles up holding his bloody nose. "He headbutted me," he shouts, pointing at a nearby blacksmith. The blacksmith, arms like tree trunks, shrugs. "He touched my anvil. There ain't a crime." "Out here it is," the sheriff says, walking past with a half-eaten peach. Historians still argue whether the West was truly lawless or just differently lawful. Some towns enforced strict codes, others ran on fear, favor, or whoever had the biggest gun and the best aim. Back at the saloon that evening, you sit near the window and watch as the sheriff breaks up a poker dispute with a single raised eyebrow. No one questions him. No one wants to. He tips his hat at you. You raise your glass in return. You're still no lawman, but at least now you know the rules. Rule 1. Don't steal a mule named Bessie. Rule 2. If you shoot someone, you better be right. Rule 3. The sheriff might nap through a bank robbery, but he'll still remember your name when it counts. Night settles over the town, slow and dusty. You lie on your cot upstairs, ankle wrapped tight, mind buzzing. Today, you enforce justice. Well, you watched someone else enforce it. That counts, right? You wake to the sound of metal on metal, clang, clang, pause, then clang again, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat made of iron. Your first thought is, someone's fixing something. Your second, more accurate thought is, someone's trying to survive another day out here. You limp toward the noise, ankle still tender, ribs still bruised from last night's saloon brawl that technically didn't involve you, unless you count catching a flying spoon with your forehead. The clanging leads you to a yard behind a small house, where 2 women are stringing lines of wire across wooden posts, with a look that says, this job doesn't care about your mood. Barbed wire. Sharp, twisted, and completely uninterested in your feelings. Historical fact? Barbed wire revolutionized the American West in the late 1800s, especially after Joseph Glidden patented his version in 1874. Before that, keeping cattle where they belonged was more art than science. After barbed wire, borders got mean. You lean against the fence post and watch them work. The younger woman gives you a nod. The older one doesn't. She's too busy hammering in another staple, jaw clenched, sleeves rolled, face burned by sun and dust, and probably disappointment. "You're settlin' or squattin'?" the younger asks, wiping sweat from her brow. You shrug, still figuring that out. She chuckles. "Aren't we all?" They're building a fence around a small patch of land that used to be open prairie. Used to be everyone's, or no one's, depending on how you looked at it. But now, someone's claiming it, wrapping it in sharp metal teeth, and that changes everything. Fringe tidbit of the day. The phrase, grass wars, wasn't just poetic. Entire communities went to battle over grazing rights, water access, and where the wire lines should run. Some disputes ended with angry letters. Most ended with bullets. The woman gestures to the horizon. "That ridge over there? We used to graze cattle across it. Then the Jacksons fenced it off." You squint toward the hills. Faint lines shimmer in the sun. More barbed wire, more division. They say the land's theirs now, she continues, hammering another nail, even though it weren't last year. Even though my brother died driving cattle across that ridge, and nobody owned a thing back then. You nod, but she's not looking for agreement. She's looking to make sure someone hears her. You listen. Suddenly a shout from the road. A man on horseback, red-faced and armed, rides up fast and furious. What the hell is this? He barks, pointing at the fence. Climb, the older woman answers without looking up. This is open land. What? The man dismounts. He's fuming. Dust swirls around his boots. You put wire across my water trail. Not your trail, the older woman says, standing now. Not your water. Tension rises like heat off the rocks. You instinctively take a step back, hand near your belt. The younger woman doesn't flinch. She's holding a hammer like she's used it for more than nails. Look, he started, trying to be diplomatic. I think there's been some... Nobody asked you, the rider snaps. Look. Historians still argue whether barbed wire was the beginning of modern property rights or the end of Western freedom. Either way, once it spread, the world changed. The argument continues, loud, sharp, bitter. You can't fence water, the rider shouts. You can fence what's mine, the older woman replies. Then, no one moves for a heartbeat. But it wasn't a gun, just a backfiring wagon on the road. Everyone relaxes, slightly. The rider spits, mounts his horse and rides off. This ain't done, he yells over his shoulder. Never is. The women return to their work. You offer to help, mostly to feel useful. They hand you a coil of wire. It's heavier than it looks and already bleeding your fingers. You understand now. This isn't just fencing. It's drawing a line in the dirt. It's saying, this is mine, not yours. It's war with staples and steel. By midnight the fence stretches a good 50 yards, and your hands are raw. You sit under a mesquite tree, sipping tepid water from your canteen, watching the horizon. You wonder how much land out here was bought and how much was taken. Fringe detail: cattle drives used to roam freely, trailing thousands of longhorns across miles of plains. But with wire fencing off land and water, those drives became nearly impossible. Fewer paths, but more conflict and more blood. As evening approaches, you head back toward town. You spot another group stringing wire a few fields over. Their fence runs straight toward a creek. This won't end quietly. Back at the saloon, you mention the fencing to the bartender. Range war's brewing, he says, polishing a glass that refuses to shine. Give it a week. You sip your drink and stare into it. You've only been here a few days, and already feel the tension tightening like the wire itself. By the time you lie down that night, your hands ache, your boots are full of splinters, and your head is heavy with unspoken conflict. Out here, peace is just a space between fences, and that space is getting smaller. The sound of hooves wakes you, not the lazy clop-clop of a rancher heading out for chores, but the frantic, thundering, something's wrong kind of gallop that rattles the ground before you even get your boots on. You rush outside, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and see dust kicking up in the distance like a storm. Then the shouts start. They're coming fast. You limp toward the commotion and see riders, 5, maybe 6, charging through town, their horses foaming, their faces pale. One slides to a stop near the well and nearly falls off his saddle. Stampede, he gasps. Big one. South Ridge. Coming down fast. Someone else yells from a rooftop, pointing, and that's when you see it. A moving wall of muscle, horns and chaos. Hundreds of cattle, hooves tearing up the ground, nostrils flaring, eyes wide with that blank bovine panic that says they'll run through a wall if it means not stopping. You back away. Everyone does. Even the dog who's usually trying to bite wagon wheels is hiding behind a barrel, Welcome to the world of the cattle drive. Historical fact: cattle drives in the late 1800s moved herds of longhorns across hundreds of miles, from Texas to railheads in Kansas or Nebraska. It was dusty, dangerous, and very profitable, until the barbed wire went up and the open range closed down. This herd isn't moving on a trail. It's panicked. Something must have spooked them. Lightning, maybe. A predator. Or just one dumb steer deciding today was a good day to run. Get to higher ground, someone shouts. You climb onto the porch roof of the blacksmith shop, pulling yourself up with hands still raw from yesterday's wire duty. From here you can see it all, the herd sweeping across the land like a furry tidal wave, driven more by fear than direction. Two wranglers on horseback are trying to circle them, one waving a lasso, the other shouting commands you can't understand. Neither is having much luck. Fringe tipwit of the day: cowboys on drives often rode up to 20 hours a day and faced wild weather, river crossings, snakebites, and stampedes, just like this. Their pay? About $1 a day. The stampede slams past town, flatting fences, tipping barrels, and sending chickens skyward like feathery comets. The ground shakes, boards rattle. You press yourself against the chimney, trying not to look like something worth trampling. And just like that, it's over. The herd moves on, a slow rumble fading into the hills. Dust hangs in the air like fog. The silence afterward is somehow louder. You climb down and cough, your mouth full of grit and adrenaline. The street is a mess. Hoof prints like shallow graves, busted fences, one tipped wagon with turnips rolling in every direction. A rancher walks past muttering, "Lost 20 head. He's not angry, just tired. Like this is normal." You offer to help because what else are you going to do? Go back to your blanket and play dead? He nods, and you follow him toward the rangeland, your ankle hating every step. You spot the stragglers, calves stuck in ditches, confused cows trying to figure out why the world is different now. You and two others spend the next 3 hours herding them back. It's not graceful. You get kicked once, nearly stepped on twice, and yelled at more times than you can count. Rancher waves you over. "Drive's coming next week," he says. "North to Dodge. You ride?" I limp, you answer. He grins. "That'll do." Next thing you know, you're signed on to join a cattle drive. You don't know it yet, but you just agreed to spend days riding through blistering sun, eating beans out of a pot older than civilization, and sleeping next to animals that weigh more than your horse. Historians still argue whether the cowboy life was romantic or miserable, but if they'd spent 5 minutes in your boots right now, they'd lean hard toward miserable. That night you sit with the ranch hands by a fire, eating stew made of meat no one's willing to identify. A man named Clay tells stories about a steer that once kicked a man into a well. Another talks about a night drive lit by lightning, all glowing eyes and white flashes like ghosts in the dark. Fringe detail: on night watch, cowboys would sing soft, low songs to calm the herd. Not for performance, just repetition. Familiarity. Some sang lullabies, others just hummed. You try a spoonful of the stew. It's spicy, somehow. Your mouth goes numb. The stars above are wild tonight. Too many to count, too bright to be real. You lie back, your body aching, your mind buzzing. Today you almost got trampled. Tomorrow you start a drive across open country with people who think it's normal to sleep next to cows and eat beans for breakfast. We smiled. This is the Wild West. And somehow, he's still here. Before the sun even dares to peek over the hills, you're already awake, sitting on a log with your boots half laced, your brain trying to convince your body that yes, this is a good idea. You're about to begin your first cattle drive. The camp is alive with quiet chaos. Men stir beans in tin pots, tie down bedrolls and curse softly as they mount reluctant horses. Someone's boiling coffee thick enough to patch a fence. A toothless cook named Mel hands you a biscuit that might actually be a rock in disguise. Few anyway. The herd's already shifting in the grey dawn light, snorting and stomping, hooves clacking against stone. Longhorns, easily over 1,000 pounds each, mill around like oversized, unpredictable toddlers with horns. You give them space, a lot of space. A wiry man named Finch, apparently the trail boss, calls out assignments. You're stationed near the flank. Keep 'em from drifting, he says, then eyes your limp. Try not to get stepped on. Again. Historical fact? Cattle drives in the post-Civil War era could cover hundreds of miles and last weeks. Cowboys worked sunrise to well after sunset, with little rest, poor food and plenty of danger. Not just from the animals, but from terrain, weather, and occasionally other people. The drive begins with a whistle, then hoots and hollers as the lead steers are nudged forward. The herd moves like syrup, slow, thick, and ready to explode if startled. Your horse, who you've named Regret, shuffles nervously beneath you. It senses your inexperience. It is unimpressed. Within the first hour, your legs ache from the saddle. Within the second, your lower back files a formal complaint, and by noon, you're convinced your spine's gone on strike. A steer breaks from the line. You try to turn, regret to cut it off, but the horse has other ideas, mostly standing still and judging you. Eventually, a more experienced rider swoops in and gets the animal back in line. You gotta move, not ask permission, he shouts over the wind. You nod like you understand. You don't. Fringe tidbit of the day. Trail cooks were some of the most respected members of a cattle drive, not for their culinary skills, but because they managed supplies, knew basic first aid, and, more importantly, could make coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Much is eaten on horseback, cold beans from a tin, and something called jerky that may or may not have once been beef. You gnaw it slowly, your jaw clicking in protest. The herd moves on. Step after step, mile after mile. The rhythm sets in, broken only by the occasional bellow, the crack of a whip, or the shriek of a cowboy who accidentally rode through a wasp's nest. He's fine. Mostly. By evening you've traveled 12 miles, crossed a shallow river, lost 3 steers to a ravine, and your thighs have begun to vibrate like tuning forks. You help set up camp, just a circle of blankets near the chuck wagon. A fire's lit. Beans, again. A few strips of salt pork. One of the hands breaks out a harmonica and starts in on a tune that sounds suspiciously like someone choking on a kazoo. Then comes night duty. You're on second watch, between midnight and 3. Your job? Ride slow circles around the herd, humming or talking to keep them calm. Panic spreads fast in a herd. One spooked steer can set off a stampede, and if that happens, you better not be in the way. You ride slowly, whispering to the cattle like they're nervous dinner guests. Easy now, don't freak out. I'm not emotionally prepared for a stampede tonight. The moon hangs low and bright. Coyotes yip somewhere in the distance. Your horse is quiet beneath you. The herd shifts and sighs like one massive, breathing organism. Historians still argue whether these long drives were necessary or just a byproduct of poor infrastructure. Once railroads spread across the West, drives declined. But for a few decades, this was the only way to move beef to hungry cities. Around 2:30 a.m. you hear a distant crack, lightning, then a low rumble. It rolls in fast. The sky flashes white. Thunder follows like a slap. The cattle twitch, uneasy. You tighten your grip. Then it happens. 1 steer bolts, then 2, then 20. "Stampede!" someone shouts. You kick your heels into Regret, who, for once, actually moves. The herd explodes in every direction. Eyes wild, hooves pounding, horns swinging. You ride hard, trying to flank the edge, turning the lead animals in a wide arc before they crash into a canyon. The plan works, sort of. You get them circling, but not before nearly losing your hat, your horse, and possibly your dignity. One steer swerves close enough to graze your leg. You let out a noise you didn't know you could make. Eventually the chaos dies down, the herd slows, the night goes still again. Someone cheers, another coughs blood. You sit there, soaking wet, covered in mud, shaking. You're still alive, the trail boss says. You're doing fine. You nod, teeth chattering. As dawn breaks, you crawl off regret and collapse beside the wagon. The cook hands you a cup of coffee, stampede coffee, he says, made with lightning. You sip. It tastes like burnt wood and salvation. You stare at the rising sun, the herd, the hills beyond, and think, I could leave. Or, I could ride one more day. Morning drips in slow and golden, like honey poured from a dusty bottle. You wake with your hat over your face, your mouth full of grit and the taste of last night's stampede still lingering somewhere between your molars and your soul. The cook's already stirring beans, because of course, and the herd is milling around like they've forgotten they almost collectively trampled you to death 7 hours ago. Today you're not riding with the cattle, you're joining a wagon train. A trader passing through last night mentioned they're heading west, deeper into the frontier, and they're short a few hands after one family accidentally set fire to their own wagon. Nobody's talking about it. You decide to hitch a ride, not because it's safer, but because you're curious how a group of people with zero wilderness experience plans to survive several hundred miles of prairie and mountains with nothing but hope and flour sacks. You hobble over to the trail boss, a tall woman with steel grey eyes and a pistol tucked into her apron. You ride? She asks. You glance at your horse. Sort of. She grunts. Good enough. You're assigned to Wagon 3, a creaky contraption held together by stubbornness and the occasional rusty nail. The family it belongs to is friendly enough. The father's got the smile of a man who believes everything will turn out fine. The mother doesn't speak much, just packs and repacks a basket of boiled eggs. The two kids immediately start fighting over who gets to name the oxen. The current frontrunners are Mr. Horns and Poop Butt. You begin to suspect this journey will not go smoothly. Historical fact: wagon trains were slow, unpredictable, and often fatal. Traveling in groups was safer, at least in theory. In practice, accidents, disease, and bad maps took out more settlers than any enemy or wild animal ever did. The train sets off by mid-morning. The wheels creak, the oxen grunt, the kids scream. You fall into rhythm quickly. You fall into one quickly. Walk a while, ride a while, walk again when the terrain gets rocky or the wagon tips for the third time in an hour. You learn fast that wagons don't like mud, or slopes, or potholes, or really, any terrain. By mile 6, someone's axle breaks. You stop. Everyone gathers around, offers advice, none of it helpful. Try a rope. Kick it. Pray louder. You fetch tools and lend a hand. The repair takes an hour and a half, 3 arguments, and 1 kid losing a shoe in a pile of ox dung. Spirits are strained. Fringe tidbit of the day: many wagon trains were delayed for days by simple breakdowns. Axles, wheels, and even entire wagons had to be repaired or abandoned. Some pioneers walked the whole way because their wagons fell apart in the first week. Lunch is biscuits and dried apples. You chew slowly, eyeing the horizon where a distant cloud suggests rain or possibly plague. The mother offers you an egg. You decline. She stares at you for a long time. The kids throw rocks at a cactus. You start to root for the cactus. By afternoon, the train hits a shallow creek. The first few wagons ford it without issue. Then wagon 5 gets stuck. Oxen panic. A crate floats away, spinning downstream like a sad wooden goodbye. You help haul it out. It's full of bonnets. The woman who owns them sobs. Those were silk. But you don't say what you're thinking, that silk bonnets might be a strange priority when your dinner consists of hardtack and boiled things. Historians still argue whether most pioneers were brave, foolish, or both. Some were skilled frontiersmen, others were accountants and tailors who thought westward meant wealth, not wolves and dysentery. By sundown, you've covered maybe 10 miles, your feet hurt, your horse is done with your nonsense. The mother hands you an egg without a word. You accept it this time. It's weirdly warm. That night, the group sets up camp. Tents pop up like sad canvas mushrooms. The fire is smoky. A man tries to play a fiddle, but only succeeds in upsetting a nearby donkey. You gather with a few others around the fire. One woman tells a story about a snake that slithered into her sleeping bag last week. Another brags about scaring off a cougar with a frying pan. You mention the stampede. They go quiet. One man finally mutters, "I'd rather face a stampede than another day with my mother-in-law in a 20-foot wagon." You nod, respectfully. Fringe detail: some wagon trains practiced drills, circling the wagons at night for protection, setting guards in shifts. Others didn't bother. They assumed the wilderness would respect optimism. You lie down on a bedroll that smells like old oats and bad choices. The stars above are beautiful, but you've learned not to trust that. Beauty out here usually hides something awful underneath. A coyote howls, someone starts snoring. But you're still here. And you haven't eaten a raw egg. Wake up to shouting. Not panic shouting, just the usual wagon train variety. Someone lost their hat, someone else stepped in something warm, and the oxen are chewing through someone's laundry. Another normal morning in the American West. You sit up slowly. Your back cracks like a twig underfoot. Your blanket is damp with dew, and a biscuit from last night has fused itself to your coat. You peel it off and consider eating it. Then don't. Today, the wagon train crosses into territory no one wants to talk about. You overhear the trail boss muttering with another rider. Words like treaty, hunting ground, and "we shouldn't be here" drift past your ears like fog. You ask a young scout what's going on. He scratches his neck, glances sideways. We're crossing Sioux land, or maybe Cheyenne, or Crow. No one's really sure, but we're not supposed to be here. Then he rides off like that answered anything. A historical fact? During the 1800 S's, settlers frequently crossed into native lands, intentionally or otherwise. Despite existing treaties, many of these agreements were ignored, violated, or hastily rewritten whenever gold, railroads, or farmland got in the way. The trail feels different today, quieter. Birds seem scarce. The wagon wheels creak too loudly, and even the oxen seem more obedient. Maybe they sense it too. That feeling in the air, like you're walking across someone's front yard without knocking. You ride a little ahead of the train to scout. The terrain is beautiful. Towering mesas in the distance, grasses swaying in waves. A herd of antelope darts across the plain like smoke with legs. But you notice things. Arrow shafts sticking out of a tree, a circle of stones left where a fire once burned, feathers caught on branches, not dropped but placed, carefully, as if watching. You turn your horse, regret, still half sentient and all attitude, and head back to the wagons. People are nervous. Someone whispers about Indian attacks. A boy claims he saw a figure on the ridge, painted red, staring down at the wagons. A woman covers her children's faces. Fringe tidbit of the day. Not all native groups were hostile to wagon trains. Some traded, guided, or even warned travelers of dangers ahead. But mistrust ran deep, especially after decades of broken promises and encroaching settlers. That afternoon, the wagon train comes to a sudden stop. A man rides up from the front. He's pale, sweating. "Blockade," he says. You ride up with the others. At the crest of the hill, you see them. 10 riders, still as statues, spears in hand, bows on their backs, faces unreadable. Their horses are calm, their eyes sharper than yours will ever be. They're not attacking. They're waiting. The trail boss rides forward, slow and cautious. She raises her hand. One of the native riders does the same. There's a moment of stillness so pure you feel the wind stop. Then the rider speaks, quietly, firmly, not in English. The boss nods. Then she turns her horse around. We're turning south, she says. Off this trail. Someone protests. That'll add 2 days. She glares. Or save all of our lives. No one argues after that. You take the new route, curving wide around the ridge. The riders remain where they are, unmoving until the last wagon disappears into the hills. Historians still argue whether most encounters between settlers and native groups were violent. Some were, many were not. But when violence did happen, it often came after years of betrayal, miscommunication, and desperation. You think about how little you know of the land beneath your boots, of the people who walked it before you, of the names you never learned, and the languages never translated. That night, you sit with the family from Wagon 3. The mother finally speaks. My grandfather said the land isn't something you own, you just pass through it, if it lets you. You nod, chewing slowly on another rock-hard biscuit. Later, as the stars come out, you walk the perimeter. Coyotes howl in the distance, but you don't feel watched anymore. Not in a threatening way, anyway. Jeff observed. Fringe detail. Some wagon trains carried small flags or symbols to signal peaceful intent to native groups. Others simply prayed hard and rode faster. You wonder which category you're in. You lie on your bedroll and stare up at the stars. Your ribs ache. Your eyes are heavy. You made it through contested territory. First time. But the line between safe passage and silent warning out here is thin. Thinner than wire. Thinner than luck. And you've already used up more than your share of that. The sun breaks over the horizon like it's auditioning for a painting. Soft gold across the plains, casting long shadows that stretch like tired ghosts. You, however, are not feeling artistic. You're feeling sore. Again. But there's a new kind of noise this morning. Less mooing, more clanking. Less oxen grunting. More men shouting about pressure gauges and darned steam valves. The wagon train is behind you now. You've wandered into something different. You limp over a ridge, and there it is. A stretch of track, raw and shimmering in the sun. Gleaming rails, wooden ties, and a mess of moving parts. You've reached the edge of the railroad. A historical fact? The Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, linking the coasts and changing the face of the West forever. But by the 1870s and 1880s, rail lines were still expanding, and still incredibly dangerous. You step down into the makeshift camp, workers everywhere, sweaty, shirtless, shouting, swearing in languages you don't recognize. The air smells like coal smoke, boiled leather, and something metallic that probably shouldn't be in your nose. A man with a clipboard yells at another man holding a monkey wrench the size of a shovel. Steam hisses from a nearby locomotive that looks like a train and more like a dragon made of iron and bad decisions. He glances at the nearest engineer. Looking for work? He asks. Shrike. He hands you a pair of gloves, barely used and definitely someone else's. Then congratulations, you're now a railman. That's how you get drafted into one of the roughest, most dangerous jobs out here, helping build, maintain and survive the railroad. You're assigned to a boiler crew. Your job? Help monitor pressure while the engine's running. It sounds simple, until you're in a box made of riveted iron packed with steam pipes, and one mistake away from being launched into orbit. Fringe tidbit of the day. Boiler explosions were shockingly common in the early railroad days. Faulty pressure valves, poor materials, or just someone dozing off could turn a locomotive into an airborne disaster. Your first run is terrifying. The train groans to life with a sound that feels like it comes from inside your ribs. Steam hisses around your boots. You can barely hear over the clanging and churning of the pistons. You ride in a sidecar, one hand on the pressure lever, the other gripping a handrail and praying this thing doesn't explode just for spite. You pass through a canyon. The rock walls flash by just feet from your face. One loose rail, one fallen boulder, and you'd be a smear on the side of history. There's a man in the cab named Branson, an old-timer with a beard that might be hiding another man inside it. He's the fireman, literally. He shovels coal like he's punishing it for a personal betrayal. You don't ride a train, he shouts over the roar. You just survive one. By the time you stop at a water tower, your shirt is soaked with sweat, your hands are blistered, and your ears are still ringing. You consider quitting. But then you see what the railroad does. It connects towns, people, news, supplies. You watch as a crate of mail gets unloaded, followed by barrels of flour, whiskey, and boots. The West may be wild, but the rails are slowly stitching it together. And people, they show up to watch. Kids run alongside the cars, waving. Men tip their hats. Women stare like they're seeing the future, and maybe they are. Historians still argue whether the railroad saved the frontier or just finished carving it up. It brought opportunity, sure, but it also brought more settlers, more disruption, and more battles over land that was already claimed. By nature, by tribes, by treaties long ignored. Back in camp that night, you sit with the rail crews. They eat fast and talk faster. Some are immigrants, Irish, Chinese, German, most speaking broken English or none at all. They laugh, smoke, tell stories, argue over who once got thrown farther by an engine misfire. One man shows you his scars. His left arm is mostly gone. Boiler blew in '78, he says, like he's talking about the weather. Took my buddy clean off the rails. Still don't know where he landed. You chew your stew a little slower after that. Fringe detail. Rail workers often made their own camps, building shanties and mess halls from leftover wood and scrap metal. There were no unions yet, no breaks. You worked until the job was done, or you were. By dawn, you're back on another run. This time you're hauling timber and all through high country. The tracks shake more than they should. Someone mutters about bad bolts. You don't ask questions. Halfway through, the engine stalls. Smoke pours out like a warning. Branson leaps into action. Too much pressure. Dump it. You yank the lever, your heart in your throat. A hiss. A release. Boom. Branson slaps you on the back hard enough to shift your spine. You're railfolk now. You're not sure how to feel about that. That night, lying beside the engine, the heat from the boiler slowly fading into the dirt beneath you, you think about how many people died just to make a train run. You think about how this line will someday be mapped, normalized, named. But tonight, still the edge of everything. You're coughing before you even open your eyes. The world smells wrong, like boiled rags, iron and sour sweat. Your head throbs, your throat feels like it's lined with sand, and your skin's gone hot and clammy all at once. You sit up too fast and immediately regret it. The sky spins, your stomach flips, your vision's edged in fuzz. You, my friend, are sick. Not just a sniffle, not a head cold. This is something meaner, something older, something people used to call the sweating sickness, or camp fever, or just plain bad luck. A historical fact: the Wild West was a petri dish of contagious horror. Typhoid, cholera, influenza, smallpox. If it had a name, it was here. If it didn't have a name, it just got buried with the last poor soul who coughed too hard. You stagger out of your bunk beside the rail camp and try to find someone, anyone, who's not hacking up a lung. You fail. The rail crew is down. Half of them at least. Pale faces, glazed eyes. A few are lying under blankets that no one dares check twice. The cook's fire is out. Even Branson, the human furnace, is shivering and mumbling something about his mother's potato soup. You try to drink water, but your hands shake too hard to hold the cup. A kind-hand woman from the mess tent helps you. Her name's Ada. She says she used to be a nurse. You decide then and there that Ada is the best thing the West has to offer. Fringe tip bit of the day. Frontier's hospitals were often just rooms with cots, whiskey, and one woman named Ethel who swore by mustard plasters and hollering at fevers until they left. Ada wipes her forehead with a damp rag. Could be typhoid, she says softly. Or dysentery. Or prairie flu. Honestly, could just be exhaustion with ambition. You try to smile, but your lips don't listen. You're moved to the shade under a lean-to, made from spare wood and railroad canvas. A few others lie beside you, some sleeping, some whispering prayers, one repeating the name Harriet, like it might bring her back. The worst part? No one knows what it is. Historians still argue whether most frontier illnesses were introduced by settlers or simply flared up worse due to the conditions, bad sanitation, worse nutrition, and zero medical infrastructure. Whatever the cause, the effect was the same. People dropped fast. You drift in and out. Fever dreams blur with reality. You see Ada's face, Branson's beard, a horse that might be yours, and a sky that won't stop swirling. You remember being healthy and vaguely resent it. At some point, a man tries to heal you with pine sap and a prayer. You can't move enough to stop him. He smears your chest and says, "Let the forest breathe for you." You pass out again. When you wake, it's darker, cooler, quieter. You're breathing easier. The pain's still there, but distant, like it's bored with you now. Ada crouches beside you. "You're past the worst," she whispers. You try to ask about the others. She just shakes her head. Later, you crawl to the edge of the camp and see them burying someone beneath a crude wooden marker. The name's already faded. The shovel hits dry dirt. No one speaks. A cough cuts the silence, then another. The grave's barely a foot deep before they move on. Fringe detail: many settlers carried talismans or wore herbs around their necks to ward off diseases. Lavender, garlic, rabbit's foot dipped in whiskey. Faith was a major treatment plan. You sit in the dirt and drink water so slowly it feels ceremonial. Every swallow is a victory. You hear someone ask, "You think it was cholera?" Another voice answers, "Wasn't wet enough, maybe plague." Someone else mutters, "Maybe ghosts." You don't laugh, because honestly, could be. The next few days are a blur of half recovery and hard truths. You're not 100%. You may be 60%, but you're alive. Some didn't make it. Branson survives, but he's not the same. His voice is quieter. His hands shake. He swears off whiskey and mutters about a dream where the train tracks stretched all the way into the sky. You help where you can, fetching water, folding blankets, burying the dead. You never learned anyone's last name. Doesn't seem to matter out here. Eventually the railroad moves on. New workers arrive. New coughs begin. The cycle restarts. You ride away from the camp with Ada's voice in your head. The West isn't just hard on the body. It gets inside your bones. And it doesn't always leave. Historians still argue whether frontier communities suffered more from violence or disease. But you've seen the answer with your own two eyes. The graveyard grows fastest when no one knows what's killing them. You look down at your hands, still shaking, but still here. At this point, you've been baked by sun, soaked by storms, and coughed halfway into the afterlife by mystery diseases. You figure you've earned a little luck, right? Maybe a gentle breeze, a quiet day, or a kind stranger. Instead, you get swindled. You limp into a dusty settlement called Bitter Flats, a place that smells like old canvas and betrayal, and decide to upgrade your transport situation. Regret, bless his stubborn soul, deserves a rest. Also, he now flinches every time you saddle up, which feels personal. You head to the livery stable, where a man with a handlebar mustache and a hat 2 sizes too big greets you like an old friend. "Looking for a fine animal today, partner?" he asks. You glance at the pen. One horse is missing an ear, another appears to be asleep while standing on 3 legs, a third is staring at the wall, like it's contemplating existential dread. "I just need something that walks and doesn't hate me," you say. He claps you on the back. "Then you're in luck. Let me show you my best mare." He presents a chestnut beauty with bright eyes, a gleaming coat, and legs like polished fence posts. She snorts softly and seems, miraculously, alive. She's a real sweetheart. Strong, fast, no vices, he says. Had a mild fever last week, but she's past it. Some say she's part Mustang. You eye the animal warily. She doesn't look sick. Would I sell you a sick horse? He says, offended. You nod. Probably. He laughs. You pay him anyway. And that's how you meet Sweet Sally. Historical fact: horse trading in the Old West was infamous for deception. Sellers used tricks like stuffing rags in hooves to disguise limps, or feeding whiskey to give animals temporary energy. The phrase horse trader was practically synonymous with liar. You ride out of bitter flats with hope in your heart and a bounce in your saddle. Sally moves like butter on a hot skillet, smooth, fast, responsive. Then, 10 miles out, she stops. Just stops. You urge her forward, nothing. You dismount to check her hooves, nothing obvious. Then she lies down, just like that. Fringe tidbit of the day: swamp fever, also called equine infectious anemia, was a dreaded disease in the 1800s. It came on quick and killed slower, and it spread fast. Symptoms: weakness, fever, and eventually full collapse. You realize, very slowly, that you've bought a dying horse. You sit beside her as the wind picks up, wondering if this is the worst moment of your life, or just the latest entry in a very long list. Sally breathes heavily, her eyes half-lidded. You whisper a few apologies. She doesn't answer. By sunset, she's gone. You bury her as best you can with a borrowed shovel and more sorrow than you expected to feel after knowing someone for less than a day. You walk the rest of the way back to Bitter Flats, your boots dragging, your heart heavy. The stable master is gone. So is his entire stock of horses. You find a sign tacked to the stable door: Gone west. Don't wait. Of course. You sit on the stoop, cradling a canteen and muttering words your mother wouldn't have approved of. Historians still argue whether the Wild West was filled with villains, opportunists, or just desperate people playing a desperate game. Maybe all three. Maybe that stable guy thought he could sell Sally and outrun his guilt. Maybe he didn't have any. The next morning, you barter a ride from a merchant hauling dried apples. His mule smells worse than your boots, but it doesn't die under you, which, at this point, feels like a win. Fringe detail: some settlers painted fake brands on stolen horses, or passed off old horses as rare desert breeds. One famous con artist once dyed a mule black and sold it as an Andalusian midnight racer. It collapsed before lunch. You pass through a canyon as the sun rises, lighting up red rock walls and casting long, jagged shadows. You're sore, dirty, and more than a little bitter. But you're wiser now. Never trust a man whose hat is too clean. Never trust a horse that walks too well. And never name them before mile 10. You wake up cold, stiff, and with a suspicious crunch in your back that wasn't there yesterday. You're on the ground again, blanket damp, the mule that hauled you here snoring nearby. Your boots are frozen, not metaphorically, literally. There's a thin crust of frost on the toes, which is wild, because it's July. Welcome to the glorious gamble of homesteading. Historical fact: after the 1862 Homestead Act, thousands of people rushed west to claim land, 160 acres, for free, if you stayed 5 years and improved it. Improved, of course, meaning turned it into something vaguely survivable. You've ended up in a settlement patch known as Clover Gulch, which is a lie on both counts. No clover, no gulch, just hard-packed soil, yellow grass, and a line of rough cabins looking like they lost a bar fight with a tornado. A man named Ellis greets you with a handshake like a bear trap, and a smile powered by desperation. Need a hand? He asks, then immediately hands you a shovel. So yes. Yes, you do. He points to a plot next to his. That one's empty. You want it? Mark it and build. You blink. Build what? He shrugs. Whatever keeps the wind out. Fringed tidbit of the day. Some early homesteaders lived in dugout holes carved into hillsides, roofed with grass and timber. They were damp, dark, and infested with everything from spiders to full-on snakes. You choose a flat patch and start digging, then sawing, then hammering, not because you're confident, but because the alternative is sleeping in a bush. You're given an extra door from a broken cabin and a pile of mismatched boards, nails, rationed, windows, optional. What you build looks more like a coffin that got lost in shipping than a house, but it stands, sort of. By nightfall your hands are blistered, your shirt soaked through, and your new home smells like desperation and squirrel droppings. You step outside and breathe in your kingdom, a quarter acre of rock, thistle, and one angry crow that keeps staring at you like it knows something. Ellis walks over, hands you a tin mug of something warm. "What is this?" you ask. "Don't ask," he replies. You drink it anyway. The next week is a blur of digging, hauling, and learning to hate grasshoppers on a spiritual level. They're everywhere, in your boots, your grain, your dreams. You plant a row of beans and they're gone by morning. You build a chicken coop and it becomes raccoon food within 48 hours. One night, it rains. Sideways. Your roof leaks in 12 places. You lie there on a damp cot, water dripping on your forehead, trying to remember if this was your plan or just a really long accident. Historians still argue whether most homesteaders truly made it. Many never did. Some left within months. Others clung on for years, driven by hope, pride, or sheer stubbornness. You start making peace with your stubbornness. You patch the roof with moss. You learn to trap rabbits. You discover that thistle, when boiled, is only slightly worse than hardtack. You trade stories for beans, buttons for salt, and once, a half-carved spoon for a pair of wool socks that changed your life. Fringe detail. Some settlers grew so desperate during droughts they dug for water with spoons, hoping to hit a spring. Others hired diviners, mystics with sticks, who claimed they could find water using vibes alone. When come the locusts? One morning, the sky goes dark with them. Not a cloud, not birds, locusts, thousands. They eat everything, leaves, bark, clothes. One tries to chew your hat, you throw it. They eat that too. Ellis swears, his wife cries. A child throws a shovel and yells, "We live in bug hell." You agree. When the swarm finally passes, your garden is gone. So is your last shred of optimism. You sit by the fire that night with Ellis, eating boiled roots and pretending they're soup. "This ain't living," he says. You stare into the flames. "No, but it's surviving." He nods. Maybe that's all we're meant to do." The next morning a letter arrives, carried by a man on horseback who doesn't stop. Just tosses it at your door and rides on like a ghost. You open it. It's your land certificate, official, stamped, signed. It says the land is yours. Yours. All of it. You look out across your plot. It's still ugly, still dry, still full of angry crows and haunted dreams. But it's yours. Smart. Because in the West, ownership might be the only form of control you'll ever get. You don't even wake up anymore. You just regain consciousness at some point after the rooster screams and the wind slaps your shack's one window like it's owed money. Your joints ache. Your back cracks. Your boots, once just worn, are now shaped exactly like your feet, and smell like it too. You step outside and breathe in what's left of morning. It smells like dust, ash, and weak coffee. A dog barks half-heartedly in the distance. A chicken limps across your yard. The wind shifts. You smell snow. Which is impressive, considering it's August. You've survived long enough now to see the West start to fade. Not in colour, not in drama, but in wildness. You walk into town, if it can still be called that. A few buildings stand stronger now. There's a post office with an actual sign. The general store sells canned peaches. There's even a school, which would be cute if it wasn't one chair, one teacher, and 14 kids with names like Buckshot and Peaches. The saloon is quieter these days. The piano is in tune, mostly. The bartender has new glasses. The sheriff's still asleep behind the jailhouse desk, but now he snores with purpose. The train rolls in more regularly. The whistle doesn't scare the horses anymore. There's talk of a telegraph line, a paved street, maybe even lawyers. You sit on the porch of the boarding house and sip from a chipped mug. The coffee isn't awful. Your hands don't shake. No one tries to shoot anyone today. And much the strangest thing. The chaos that used to define this place, stampedes, snakebites, shotgun weddings, it's still out there, but it's thinner now. Diluted. You watch a man in a bowler hat step off the train. His shoes are polished. His coat's too clean. He's carrying a briefcase. He looks around with mild interest, like he's scouting a spot for a bank, not trying to dodge an ambush. Fringe tidbit of the day. Many Wild West towns didn't die so much as settle into bureaucracy. Town councils replaced shootouts. Property taxes replaced pistols. The blush danger didn't vanish. It just got paperwork. You head to the livery. Regret is still there. Older now. Slower. But when he sees you, he lifts his head and flicks his ears like, "I knew you'd still be kicking around." You pat his side. "We're not in the wild anymore, old man." Historians still argue whether the end of the Wild West was a single moment, the last train, the last duel, the last land grab. But in truth, it just got paved over, softened, filed down until it fit into ledgers and courtrooms. You walk past the blacksmith's, now half hardware store, past the tailor who now offers city fashions, past the saloon where someone is playing chess. Chess. You stop, watch the pieces move, and you realize you survived. Barely. You didn't get rich, you didn't become famous, but you didn't get shot, gored, trampled, poisoned, swindled, or eaten by a mountain lion. You didn't die of fever in a ditch. You didn't fall into an outhouse. You didn't disappear in the dust. You lived. And now, the Wild West is still here, but it's quieter, tidier, less likely to kick you in the teeth. You sit beside regret and lean back in the shade. Because now, finally, you can rest. You've heard that. And now, the wind softens. It brushes across the dry earth like a sigh, passing over hills that once echoed with hoofbeats and gunfire, and now hold only silence and scattered memories. The sun lowers, stretching golden fingers across worn rooftops and cracked earth. The shadows are long now, gentle, familiar, the kind that don't threaten, but cradle. The porch creaks beneath you, the last warm mug resting in your hands. The town around you fades into hushed twilight. No duels, no dust storms, no boots pounding down the street in a panic. Just the hum of a quiet world. Finally tired enough to sleep. In the distance, a coyote howls. Not a warning, not a hunger, just a lullaby. You let your eyes close. Your breath steadies, your limbs grow heavier, wrapped in that clean, tired ache that only comes from surviving too many stories and living to see the epilogue. You made it. Not as a hero, not as a legend, but as a witness. To storms and stampedes, to crooked cards and kind strangers, to a land that never cared if you lived but somehow allowed it anyway. Let that last image linger. The empty street, the quiet horse, the stars beginning to spark above the horizon, one by one. The wild is still out there, but tonight it leaves you alone. The story ends here. Close your eyes, drift deep, sweet dreams.